what happened with the Asians is that they were, the parental pressures to be better caused them to perform better in school. You know, and I think that is where that all started from. Because I think the Asians came over after the Europeans, since they came over after the Europeans, the ancestry of the Asians realized that in order to succeed in this country that was already populated by Europeans, they needed to make sure that they were well educated. And so the grandparents always forced the parents to make sure that they were well educated, and the same thing happened all the way through with me. You know, in my case, you know, there was never a question that I was going to go to college. I mean, it was just understood, and so education was always a primary thing in, at least in my family of Japanese descent, and I'm sure that's true with all my friends of Japanese and Asian descent. And because of that, everybody studied more. They just did better on the test, and so they got this iconic thing of being smarter. It wasn't really smarter; it's just that the pressure to do better. And I don't think that was held true for everybody. And it actually gets diluted as time goes by.
For the pressure that you're talking about, your personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
is it more towards your family, like pressure towards achieving what your parents want, or towards yourself, or just?
That's a good. It becomes your goal to do better. You know, I never wanted to embarrass my family by not achieving or not going to college and not doing well in school and so forth. In fact, as I shared with you guys in class all the time, you know, I was being a third generation Sansei Japanese, I was kind of getting pretty well Americanized already, and so I probably did not perform nearly as rigorously as perhaps the generation before me, or even my older sister. And but there was never a point where I was going to screw around so much that I was going to flunk out of school or anything. So it becomes internalized because you do it so much. You know, it starts with your parents, but eventually becomes you, and that's what happened with me.
Growing up, what stereotypes did you face?
I was very almost none. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and as you're both aware, the Bay Area is pretty darn liberal. And so there were not a lot of Japanese, but we had a fairly decent-sized community of Japanese in Sonoma County, where I was born and raised. But there was no prejudice against Asians that I ever felt. And in fact, I never dated an Asian girl until I went to college, because there basically weren't too many Asian girls to date at the time. But I never felt any problems with that at all. So there were no stereotypes that I felt at that time.
Well, modern day, today, what stereotypes do you think you fit into?
That's good. Probably I think I fit into a stereotype of a third generation Japanese. You know, we're pretty laid back, pretty easygoing. We achieved a certain level that we wanted to achieve, and well, I don't think I'm nearly as pushy on my kids as my parents and my grandparents were on my parents. My parents perhaps were on me. And so, you know, if we get to this thing about Americanizing type of thing, I think that I think I fit this classic stereotypic third generation Sansei male, and that's it.
What are your thoughts on the Yellow Power movement?
When I was younger, I was involved with Japanese Asian organization. I'm not as much involved with it now, and so I'm not so much sure if it's just simply my age or if it has to do more with my attitude that has changed. But I know that, you know, as in any type of movement, it's always generated by a younger generation. It doesn't start with old people, because old people are settled and they basically have what they want. And so in my terms, and for me, you know, I'm very proud to be Japanese, I'm very proud to be Asian. You guys probably pick that up in class all the time. But I don't walk around, you know, fist high saying Asian power, you know, but I do look, I do like having Asians, Japanese Americans succeeding. You know, I think it's good for the culture, and I do like people still recognizing the fact that they are of Asian descent. I don't want that to get so watered down. Even though my son is only half Japanese, he's still pretty ethnically, if he had to pick one of the two, he'd probably say he's more Asian than he is Caucasian. And so I think that was taught to him.
Well, what do you think about the ethnic enclaves in the U.S.?
The ethnic one?
Enclaves, in the U.S.
Honestly, I'd be honest with you, I can't even answer. I don't even really think about that much. You know,
What do you think about the missing representation of Asian Americans in the media?
And again, I think that has to go back to the last question. I think it has a lot to do with the need for more Asian Americans. I do not necessarily personally believe that we need more Asian Americans simply being shown because we have more Asian Americans. That didn't come out right. I don't think it's necessary to just get more Asian Americans just because we want more Asian Americans. If there are good qualified Asian Americans to be recognized, that's fine. I do not like the idea of not having any representation whatsoever being visual. You know, I hate going to see movies where white people are trying to play Asians. You know, why not just use an Asian type of thing? We had that problem obviously in the 40s and the 50s, but I do. Yeah, I'll be there in about 2 minutes. I think I'll probably answer that for you. That you just get the representation, get the best person represented, and if an Asian can do it, then great. I'm not really a proponent of it, of getting an Asian just because he's Asian. You know, I'd much rather get the most qualified person to do the job.
What do you think of restrictions on immigration?
Today, immigration?
Yes.
I think it has a lot to do with how I feel about it is why are they putting restrictions on it? If they're putting restrictions on it out of a fear for a particular ethnic group, I think that's wrong, you know, because we go back to the idea that we just talked about a moment ago about. But I always think about this as the United States, you know, that regardless you're Asian, Hispanic, whatever, that this country, if you're willing to come to this country and work, that you deserve to come to this country. And so I don't like the idea because I know that they had that problems with my ancestry. My grandparents had a hard time coming over here, owning land and so forth. So I have that little thing behind me thinking, well, hey, I don't want someone else facing that problem. You know, same thing, and you might even have a question about this, about the Muslims being prosecuted and they persecuted, today by the public, simply because at this moment in time, most terrorists, or many terrorists, are having, you know, that Mideastern background, and so people, just because you're Mideastern, all of a sudden, you should be terrorized by the fact that, hey, you're not going to be able to go to this, live here and so forth, because that's exactly what happened to the Japanese during World War II. So I have a huge problem with that, and so.